önemli panellerimizden birisini daha gerçekleştireceğiz. Döngüsel ekonomide atık yönetimi ve kaynak verimliliği oturumunu yönetmek üzere Çevre ve Şehircilik Bakan Yardımcımız Sayın Profesör Doktor Mehmet Emin Birpınar'ı kürsüye arz ediyorum. Diğer panelistlerimiz olan OECD Çevre Direktör Yardımcısı Sayın Anthony Cox, Dünya Bankası Türkiye Ülke Direktörü Sayın Auguste Tano KOUAME, Birleşmiş Milletler Sınai Kalkınma Örgütü Çevre Birimi Yöneticisi Sayın Smail Alhilali ve UNDP Türkiye Mukim Direktörü Sayın Claudio Tomasi'yi de sahneye arz ediyoruz. Sözü Sayın Moderatörümüz Profesör Doktor Mehmet Emin Birpınar'a bırakıyorum.
Distinguished representatives of the international organizations and distinguished participants, I will continue in English. So, because our colleagues from different international organizations, so it is better to speak in English here, because this summit is becoming more international every day. So this is the second one, Zero Waste Summit. The first one was held in Ankara last year in the same day, the 1st of November. So we have the second one here. This is also the sustainable one. Then we will have another, I hope, next year and in the coming years. As you may know, that this Zero Waste initiative is under the auspices of our First Lady, Madame Erdogan, and she's the one who has been taking care of this zero waste issue, and then just putting the zero waste issue on the agenda of Turkey, also in the agenda of the world. And she's the only First Lady in the world who's dealing with the environmental issues, and so high level support is here. So as the Minister of Environment and Urbanization, we are very happy to receive this support, and especially when we are trying to pass all these laws and regulations in the Parliament, we feel the support of her, and also, of course, our Minister of Environment and Urbanization, Mr. Kurum, is always supporting his bureaucrats to have more sustainable Turkey, more environmentalist Turkey. So because of that, this Madame Erdogan, the First Lady, was invited by UNFCCC and also the COP presidency of Chile to Santiago. Very special letter was written to her directly, but unfortunately yesterday the COP25 was cancelled because of the problems in Santiago, in the capital city of Chile. I hope this meeting, this COP25, will be held somewhere in the world. Then we will very closely follow up. And Turkey is also one of the candidates to receive this one for this year. And also for COP26, we were the first official candidate to receive, to have this COP26 in 2020 in Antalya, but unfortunately Italy and England, they were the another candidates, and the pre-COP will be held next year in Italy, and also the COP26 will be in Glasgow in England. So, but this is a very good competition, I can say. I mean, so many countries, they are trying to have this kind of meetings, and because we always think that the environmental issues is not only for us but also for the future generations. We have to leave them some water to drink, to use, and we have to leave some soil to harvest, and also we have to leave some air to breathe for the future generations. And we always say that environment and the children, they are both our common future. And because of that, so we are coming, our generation was linear economy generations actually. So buy, use and throw. But now new generation is different. New generation, our OECD friend is here. Our new generation is recycling economy generation because the resources are limited. The population is increasing. The increase in the population in the world now, the population is now 7.7 billion, and in 2050 it will be maybe 10 billion in the world. But the production, produced waste amount is 2.05 now, and it will be 3.5 in 20. So the increase in the population is maybe 30%, but increase in the production of the waste with almost 60%. So we have to fill this gap. We have to see these numbers and try to take measures as a decision makers in the world. So I have my guest today. They are going to contribute actually too much to our discussion. I have dear Anthony Cox from OECD. We have been working very closely actually during our EPR report, this third environmental performance review of Turkey. We have made last year, so we have worked together from the environmental director of Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, so from OECD. So I would like to thank once again for him for this contribution and for being here, and then thank you very much for coming. And my another guest is Mr. Auguste Tano from the World Bank, country director for Turkey. He is with us, and we work with the World Bank together in many fields, varying the climate change and the sustainable cities also. And Mr. Smail Alhilali, the chief of the Emerging Compliance Regimes Division within the Department of the UNIDO, and he has made contributions, very valuable contributions, in the development of the global eco-industrial park program of the UNIDO. And my last speaker, my friend, Mr. Claudio Tomasi, and he has been here, he loves Turkey, I know that, and the United Nations Development Program from UNDP, and we always appreciate our close cooperation with UNDP, and we have now almost 11 million projects for climate adaptation project. We are going to work together in the field of the climate change, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank him here in your presence. So our panel is not going to last not more than 1 hour. So you can hear, so first of all, I will give 10 minutes to each speaker. And I would like to ask panelists not more than 10 minutes for the first question. And then we can continue. As I said before, we give high importance to the zero waste projects. And then in Turkey, let me give you some numbers. Amount of domestic waste was around 17 million tons in 1995. Now it is 31 billion tons by 2017. Only here in this city we have 22,000 tons per day, the waste we are producing. So from the produced waste, you can now calculate the population of the cities. So every citizen produces on 1 kilogram of waste in the world. So this city has 25 million people living in a day. So coming and going, tourists and everything. But normally it is maybe 15, 16 million. But the tourists and refugees and everything all together, it is 22 million. So if you ask the amount of the waste produced in the city, you can just calculate easily the number, the population now. So So this amount is expected to reach by 23 to 38 million tons. How to deal with this? That is a huge problem. I mean, the landfills is not a solution. Already in the Western countries, they are closing all the landfills. The only solution is the recycling issue. You have to recycle. So this is not a linear economy, but recycling economy should be there. But when we look at the composition of the domestic waste, almost 55% of biodegradable waste and 6% plastic waste, 8% paper and cardboard, and 3% glasses and 1% of metals and other waste. So ratios actually demonstrates that the good part of waste in Turkey is recyclable. So not only the plastic, paper, and metals, but also the others, should not be sent to the landfill, but used as for the energy also production, as an energy to be used. So this zero waste issue was started in 2017 as initiated under the auspices of Her Excellency First Lady Madam Erdogan. Now implementation of this pilot phase of the project for 27 months resulted almost 318 tons of recyclable waste to the economy, and over 25,000 institutions and foundations in particular, presidency building in Turkey and our building, Ministry of Environment, already adopted the zero waste project. We carry out educational activities also aiming at raising awareness about zero waste approach also. 2 million people have participated in the trainings and courses about the project since the start of this project. So we are very much keen on this issue. We are very much eager to have more results, and we want to increase this recycle ratio at least 35% by 2023. So now it is almost with 15%, 13%, but we want to increase to 35%. At the end of century, it's supposed to be 60, 70%, like in Denmark or in Germany, but it takes time. And when I talk with our colleagues from Germany, they said they have been working on this issue more than 30 years. So it's not easy to change the habits of the people and also the culture. So it takes time, but we have already started. This is good news. And we have no bad news, actually. So I will give you more details. Now, we have to change the behaviors also. The behavior change is not is the key to grow our economy and to create, of course, new jobs. And this is recycling economy is going to create more jobs, more opportunities in the future. At this point, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alhilali. Circular economy provides a wide range of opportunities for reaching sustainable development goals, from international utilization of natural resources and to creation of green jobs. So how does your institution see these opportunities, and what is your agenda about circular economy? Floor is yours, sir. Yes, Mr. Smail. Yes, yes, he's the one. I think. Okay.
Thank you very much.
What is your agenda? I mean, what's there, please?
Thank you very
You
much.
were looking at me, so I saw. Sorry. You want to take the floor first?
Not at all, just listening to your question.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I would like to thank the government of Turkey for inviting UNIDO. I am from United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and our agenda is to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development in developing countries. As you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks, we are shifting from linear systems of production to circular economy. Basically, we used to extract, then we manufacture, produce, and then we consume, and then we dispose of. But it's not anymore the end of the story. for the consumer and the producer, it should not be the end of the story. When you dispose of, it means landfilling. We need to shift to zero waste or to circular economy, where we have to think how we can close the loops of products. And for that, we are working with government, but also we need to work with academia. We need to work with the private sector, because the solution at the end of the day, it has to be an industrial solution. And from our agenda, promoting as part of the achieving sustainable development goals, we feel that there is a need to translate the sustainable development goals to different levels, at the government level, but also at the local level. We have local problems, and they need to find also local solutions. The concept of circular economy is not new. It was there from the 70s. It was tried in some countries, but now we would like to have a larger application of circular economy at the global level, not only in developed countries. As my organization is focusing mainly on developing countries, we bring experiences of developed countries, successful stories, and where we see the role of the industry, because industries are in the cities. And I think the industry can provide solutions to the municipalities when it comes to municipal waste management. Of course, our focus is mainly to deal with industrial waste produced by other industries, but the technology that is in place to recycle the industrial waste can be also used to take care of the municipal waste. We need also to pay attention to collection. Collection should also be considered as part of the value chain. And what we noticed in developing countries in the cities, basically we collect household waste, small problems, we transport them, and we create a big problem in the landfill. And if you look at the situation of landfills in developing countries, they are more to be compared to dump sites. They are not sanitary landfills. And we feel that we need to do segregation at the source. However, we need also to put incentives for households, how they can segregate between plastics, paper, and metals and other materials. We need to put in place ecosystems, because there is no use if the households are segregating and then the municipality is collecting as a whole and mixing, and it goes to the landfills. We noticed in some cities also that the contracts between the municipality and the waste management company, the performance criteria is the volume of waste that is collected and then put in the landfill. I think there is a need to look for other performance criteria. We need also to include how many recyclables are discarded from the landfill, and also bring the materials, the glass, the paper, the metals to the industry. We have been promoting a very good concept that is implemented in Japan, what they call the Eco-Town program. And this program is supported by the government because we need the initial investments. So public investment is very important at the beginning. This national Eco-Town program is basically to link between the cities, municipalities collecting waste, segregation, and we created recycling industrial parks where we have the industries that are specialized in glass, in paper, in metals, and this collection of municipal waste segregated, and then the recycling industries are taking care of it, and then they regenerate new products for the industries and also for other purposes. And I think this is one kind of circular economy approaches. We feel also that the zero waste might be difficult for a household or for a single company. That's why we created the concept of eco-industrial parks, where we have different industries, and the idea as a collective solution, the waste of one industry could be, with certain conditions, become an input for another industry. And then when you extend your system to an industrial park, then you can achieve the zero waste. It doesn't mean necessarily that each industry has to produce zero waste. This is impossible. But the concept of the industrial park can also be extended at the city level, and that's why we are now promoting the sustainable cities. We noticed that we have good pilots in developed countries, but unfortunately we cannot copy and paste. We need to learn from these experiences and domesticate the concept in developing countries. And then we need to be innovative in terms of finding local solutions, because there is a cost issue. There are also other parameters. And the key the key factor for us is we need to bring multiple stakeholders. Universities should talk to the industries, and also we should talk to the municipalities, and we should talk also to the private sector. And if we trial a solution, we need to have it scaled up, and there we need also private investments. Public investments cannot sort out all the issues. And that's why the circular economy, it's not about only recycling waste. It's also about having innovative solutions from the banking system, from the financial institutions, how we can better rate the worthiness of a project, and how we can find solutions for the people. Because at the end of the day, UN organizations, national governments, local governments, the key performance indicator is satisfaction of the citizens. And we have different tools. We cannot deal with all of them. We are more focusing on the production side, but we need to partner with other partners. We have here UNDP, the World Bank Group, also the OECD and others, where we can all together contribute to provide local solutions for local problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Alhilali. I mean, this good examples is very important, as and also the pilot projects, as you mentioned, in the municipalities. What we have done, for example, in our ministry, we don't have in any table, under the table, we don't have any trash bins now. And no trash lorries are coming for 17 months. So we are recycling almost everything in our building. The same thing in the presidential buildings also. So it can be done. We are just, when the mayors, they pay a visit to our ministry, I show them how we are doing the things. I mean, we say that this is zero waste. So everything goes to the production. So we are composting and giving. And so there is no waste production from our building in Ankara. The same thing happening in our provincial buildings in the cities also. And also we have a pilot project. Our mayor from Kızılcahamam is here, and we have been applying this project to the cities also. So once the decision makers, the mayors, municipalities apply this zero project in their buildings and also in the buildings of the governments, then the other buildings of the private sector will follow. That is very important. So this issue, as you raised, we have to follow up. So thank you very much once again for your contribution. So let me go to the World Bank. You know, as the World Bank issued, now I will give you the floor. The World Bank issued a very comprehensive report about waste management last year. As I read, according to this report, namely Water Waste 2.0, report is called Global Annual Waste Generation was 2.01 billion tons in 2016, and it is expected to increase to 2.59 million tons in 2030 and 3.4 billion tons in 2050. So it will increase huge amount. So the same report reveals that the global cost of the waste management, I mean, the increase in the waste will be from 1 to 3.4. What about the cost of it? You know, the World Bank already calculate the cost of the waste management. So it will reach from right now it is 205 billion and it will be in 2050. It's going to be 3.375 billion. So these figures are dramatic, actually. From where we can find this money, this finance. So in the view of these figures, I would like to address the same question about circular economy to Mr. KOUAME as well, our friend. So how do you assess the situation, Mr. KOUAME? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. First, let me use this opportunity to thank the government of Turkey on behalf of the World Bank for putting the zero waste at the forefront of the agenda, and thank in particular the First Lady for championing that. This is a very important agenda for the world. As you said, Mr. Minister, the report that we put out last year, Water Waste 2.0, and by the way, it's called 2.0 because it's the second report in this series. There was one report that came out earlier. And the report really tells us waste issue is a big issue. And not only it's a big issue, but it is a growing issue. It is scary. When you look at the amount of waste we produce every day, you gave the numbers. It is scary, and the numbers are growing. And treating this waste is important because if we don't treat it, the cost to us is outstanding. But then treating it is also expensive. So we are between a rock and a hard place once we produce the waste. That's why avoiding waste production is important also, and zero waste becomes really critical. Having said that, it is, one of my favorite sayings is that you cannot make an omelette without breaking an egg. It is almost impossible not to produce waste. If you're going to live, if you're going to have to make an omelette, you have to break something. If you're going to live, you have to break something. The question is, what do we do in that process? Do we produce the egg, in a way that is efficient? But when we break it, do we use the rest to do something useful of our life? And since we're talking about saying, and this is going to run through my intervention this morning, another favorite saying is from Lavoisier. Those of you who are interested in chemistry, Lavoisier was an 18th century French chemist. He is one of the founders of modern chemistry. And he said, talking about mass, he said, nothing is lost, nothing is produced, everything is transformed. Essentially saying, the world is the same. Everything weighs the same way. It's just things become different. And I would like to paraphrase him for the sake of the zero waste conversation to say that nothing is lost, nothing is produced, everything can be transformed into usable product. So the challenge for us is to transform our waste in something that we can use so that it no longer becomes a waste, it becomes a commodity, it becomes an input into something else. And we've taken this agenda quite seriously in the bank. First, because the environmental impact of waste itself is important. If we leave the waste unattended, it contributes to CO2 emissions. So it makes us unhealthy. It makes our environment unhealthy. So we need to treat the waste. Second, it makes our waters totally polluted. The sea is choking with plastic today. In one of the sessions today, one presenter quoted a figure that we also have in the World Bank report, that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the waters, in the sea, than fish. I mean, can we imagine that, in our lifetime, there will be something that has more of a presence in the sea than the inhabitant of the sea? So that's where we're heading. We're producing plastic and we're throwing it away in the sea, and it's going to choke the waters and the fish. Third, waste is creating inequity in the world. Our world is already very unequal. and we're adding to that inequity because of waste. We produce more waste in developed countries, in advanced economies like the US growing faster, and the share of low-income countries in global waste production is going to increase faster. And if that additional waste is not treated, because 93% is not treated, then we're going to add to the amount of waste that is not treated. In the north, where waste production is growing less slowly, almost all the waste is treated. Only 2% is not treated. So when you look at where we're heading toward a world where we're producing more waste that is not treated. How do we fix that? We think there is a role for international organizations like ours to work with low-income countries to increase their capacity to treat waste. But we can't stop there. We also need to work with countries that are not that poor, the countries that are middle income or high income, and Turkey is in that category, to support the agenda. You already have resources and capacity, and you have a plan to reduce waste. So the challenge here for us is to make sure that the knowledge that is being created here can be available to other countries, to make them aware that it's possible, but also connect Turkey with countries like Japan, who are at the forefront of waste treatment. And, Japan had to do it because they don't have enough space just to keep the waste. The land available in Japan is very limited, and they also have income to treat their waste. So they have shown to the world that it is really possible to make waste treatment as part of your central agenda. So I'm happy to say that we're working with Turkey to connect Turkey with Japan, and I think this month we will be working with a delegation from your ministry who will be looking at the Japan experience. Globally, at the World Bank, we have increased our support to the waste management agenda. Between 2000, the year 2000 and now, we have invested a total of 4.7 billion in about 340 projects in many countries, including Turkey. So let me share with you a little bit the things that we're doing in Turkey. As you said, Mr. Minister, we have worked with you in the municipal services, and we had a project, municipal services project, between 2005 and 2012. We supported projects in 14 municipalities, including Kayseri and other municipalities, to create waste treatment facilities. We are preparing a project now to invest also in waste treatment facilities in municipalities that are facing the pressure of the refugee population. And this project is going to be supported by the European Union through the Fund for Refugees in Turkey. We are in conversation with your ministry and other ministries on climate action agenda, which is very important. You mentioned UNFCCC at the beginning. We're working on this agenda feverishly because we really believe that climate change is the next big thing and perhaps the most important thing today. So as we engage in that conversation with the government of Turkey on climate action, we want to incorporate zero waste into that conversation, and we are prepared on the World Bank side to support projects that the Turkish government would like to see us supported. Finally, let me mention also that we are learning at the World Bank from the experience of countries like OECD and members and the EU, and we're using that experience constantly in our work in the Europe and Central Asia region, the ECA region, in many countries, and we would like to have Turkey join some of these initiatives. One of them is, and I will end here, is the Pro Blue initiative. The World Bank, with the support of some donors, have created an initiative called Pro Blue. It is a bit similar to the Zero Waste Blue, and we work in that project because it is a kind of regional approach that is encouraged under the Pro Blue. We're working with many countries in the region on the Black Sea or the Mediterranean Sea to reduce waste in those seas, and we'll be happy to work with Turkey to join that initiative. So let me stop here, and I'll be happy to come back to elaborate on some additional points.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. KOUAME. And we always believe that, I mean, as you already earlier mentioned, that breaking eggs, well, we have to break the eggs, of course, but without harming anything. That is very important, especially you don't have to harm yourself by cutting your finger or anything. That's the easy way. But your role as a World Bank is important, and our Minister of Finance and Treasury, together with them, especially the environmental finance, we are working together with you, and then we are discussing and negotiating on the package together with the Germans and France and the World Bank. Thank you very much for your help also there, because Turkey is a developing country and trying to reduce emissions, because we have a huge potential of emission reduction. So this international finance, especially the climate finance, is important. We always believe that, I mean, when it comes to the pollution, there is no border. I always say that when we talk with our Western friends from Europe, you can put a visa for Turkey, but you cannot put a visa for the pollution of Turkey. So we have to work together. So you cannot punish Turkey from the environment by cutting the finance from IPA projects or from others. No, you cannot do that. I mean, because that is, when I pollute the Mediterranean, it will come to you, to your cost. So you have to be very careful on that issue and try to work with us, because we have already applied almost all the acquis and rules and regulations of the European Union since 2004. So already adapted almost everything. So we are doing our best. As you already mentioned, give us an example to work together with Japan. During the G20 summit, our First Lady, Her Excellency, invited the mayor of Kamikatsu city. The Kamikatsu city is a small, actual district in Japan, and they are separating and categorizing all the waste into 45 different categorization they are making. Very small city, but nobody is taking the waste from the house. But people, they just collect and then they take to the certain place and then differentiate everything and separately. So they are doing their best. Only the very old people, for them, the mayor, the municipality is going and taking the waste. So we had the opportunity to listen the mayor. He was invited by our First Lady in Kamikaze, and also he was invited to this summit, but he had another, I think, meeting in China. Because of that, he couldn't attend. But we will continue inviting him in the next, the third, fourth Zero Waste Summits. By the way, I would like to say hello to our keynote speaker of Turkey, Mr. Smail is here, and he's going to give a very good speech this afternoon. And he had a huge agenda, but he didn't break our heart, and he accepted our invitation. And I invite all of you in the afternoon session at 4 o'clock. He will be the keynote speaker for this Zero Waste Summit. Mr. Smail, welcome. Now, while the classical model of economy based on the system that is make, use, and dispose, as I said, this is a linear economy in a world of rapid changes and environmental degradation. Instead of this linear economy, we have a circular economy model has been gaining in importance nowadays. So circular economy obligates us to implement zero waste approach for sure and carry out our resources efficiently, which is getting more and more prevalent with each passing day. So now I'd like to give the floor and ask almost the same question to Mr. Tomasi. How do you consider the future resource efficiency and zero waste approach globally in environment, economic, and social and cultural aspects? So from UNDP, our friend Claudio, please, floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation on behalf of UNDP. We are very honored to be part of such an esteemed group of colleagues debating around such an important issue. You just asked the million-dollar question, so there is no easy answer, of course, but I try to articulate a couple of messages and ideas around it. I will try to restrain from seeing like the half empty glass or the half full glass, or being a hawk or a dove, trying to be as realistic as possible in this elaboration. Starting with the negative side, let's say, it's just bringing a single data to the table that has to do with the zero waste, and I will expand on the rest. If we look at the tons that every year we are producing in plastic, and we compare it to 60 years ago, to me that is one of the most appalling and scary numbers that I have seen, because we are talking about 380 million tons production right now of plastic, while in the 50s it was 2 million. So from 2 million to 380 million is almost, well, you add 2 zeros and multiply by 2, more or less, so 200 times in 60 years. And out of these, around 15,000% gets recycled or downcycled, let's say, globally speaking. So this means that the trend that we're living in is not a positive trend. The colleague from Auguste from the World Bank was saying, this is scary. The trend is not a positive trend. The trend is a negative one. And we are trying to run around and see what kind of solution we can find. So let's look at the half full glass. I think that the whole discussion about zero waste and circular economy should also be framed in a larger agenda, which is the agenda. For the first time as humanity, we do have since 2015. I would not underestimate that. I'm talking about Agenda 2030, and I'm talking about the SDGs. And why I want to start from that point? Because this is, first of all, an agenda that brings together two philosophies, two communities, two different worlds that for years have developed somehow in parallel, but then they progressively converged, kind of the environmental discourse and narrative and the developmental narrative, okay? They've been internationally and even locally for a long time separated. For the first time, there was an agreement to bring these two groups together and these two goals together. This is such a powerful message. There is a big difference from 2015 before and from 2015 afterwards. So this is an important characteristic of the Agenda 2030. The second one is the participation in the Agenda 2030. Before, the predecessor of the Agenda 2030 was focusing mainly on developing countries. It was not really a global, a truly international and all-inclusive agenda. Agenda 2030 also includes developed countries and has them accountable and to take action around the SDG. Another element of innovation of the 2030 agenda is the role of the private sector. Agenda 2030 is not an agenda that has been thought up by the UN or by international organizations or by governments alone. Like, of course, governments are the signatories of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. But it's clear, going back to the financing idea, that by no means the governmental initiatives will be enough, globally speaking, leave alone the international organization, in order to achieve the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. Private sector must be involved, and private sector must be at the forefront. We're talking about trillions of investment in a certain direction. And that is where I would like to focus when you were asking about the circular economy. The scary thing is not just the plastic kind of discussion and numbers, which it is indeed, but is a change of direction that is required. So we are looking ahead at 2030. We saw that the trend is negative. This requires a change in direction, number one, an acceleration, number two. That is the second message. So once the direction has been shifted, then we have to accelerate, because as we stand right now, we're not likely to reach the majority of the SDGs or the Agenda 2030. And then I think the bit of hope in this comes around, okay, how can we produce this acceleration, and in which direction, and how this can lead to additional jobs, to economic growth, to reducing inequality. That's what we're discussing when we talk about the circular economy, but even more at large about sustainable development. And never like now, luckily, we are in a world, in a situation where innovation and technology is very much at hand. There are a lot of real opportunities to make a change in the right direction in order to accelerate. And therefore, this is a very powerful message that we have to take into consideration when we analyze the SDGs. The most important, as usual, is left as the last one. And the last one talks about partnerships. And this is an agenda that cannot be carried out by public authorities alone, by governments, by states, cannot be carried out by international organizations alone, by local communities even alone. This requires working together in the right direction. And this right direction, when we come to the zero waste, is to increase the focus not exclusively to the last end, as it has been done so far, because probably it's the low-hanging fruit, but it's also the most visible. It is indeed very important, which is the recycling part of it, the disposal part of it, even the reusage part of it. But we have to really focus on consumption, we have to focus on production, on modes of productions, and we have to focus on transportation. If we don't focus holistically around these three blocks, only addressing the last bit or the down part of the equation will have a very limited effect. What I'm talking about? I'm talking about that from different angles, for example, from the legislative angle, incentives and disincentives, tax system, banning, financial incentives in the right direction can send very powerful messages, and many countries are already doing that, to the private sector and to the consumer. Because one thing, of course, is the individual choice and the behavioral change that we have discussed so far, and also in other panels. It's very important for the person to be empowered, to be informed. What should I do? Is decision A versus decision B the most viable and the best one? So that is important indeed, the behavioral change. But then also on the production side, the incentives or disincentives must be very prominent in the policies, because that will direct the private sector to produce in an environmentally friendly or not environmentally friendly, in a zero waste direction or not a zero waste direction. Transportation, why I'm mentioning it? We're talking about the industrial bit before, but let's think also about the food industry and the agricultural side of it. Does it really make sense that we are eating something that comes from hundreds and thousands of kilometers away? What does this imply in terms of waste, in terms of contamination, even in terms of pollution? But what does that imply also in terms of production and productivity, a well-being and livelihood of the local people that could producing or historically do produce this product? This is to say that it's very much connected. So the policies in this case cannot and should not be sectorial to address just one single issue, but they have to go across the different sectors, because at the end of the day, that is the most powerful message, again, of Agenda 2030, which is on top of the acceleration, the integration. If we don't integrate our way of working from all areas of society, it is very unlikely that we're gonna get any positive result in this sense. A particular area is that I think that is very important, and we are cooperating here in Turkey very actively, is around energy efficiency. Sometimes this is underestimated in terms of the waste management. But the power of really reduce the inefficiency in the energy production, in the energy use, has an incredible positive effect on waste at the production and the usage level. And so this is an area that we call as an accelerator area, by which it means that by addressing this specific issue, this can have positive effects across different areas of the economy and the society and the environment. Another element I want to highlight is what Auguste from World Bank was saying before about the inequalities. This is something that we must take into account when we address the environmental, let's say, agenda at large, but the sustainable agenda. And it has to do with the zero waste, because in another panel I was listening before, we were talking about the landfilling and the dumping, even in certain cases in developing countries. When you look at it, the relative impact on poor population and disadvantaged population is much higher than the others, because typically municipalities, of course, the dumping sites or the landfilling sites at the best are tendentially built in areas where poor people live, where disadvantaged people live. And this has health impact, lung cancers, different kind of diseases. Why am I bringing this to the table? Again, to say that we cannot address this exclusively from one point of view, but this is linked to the health of people, to the inequalities, to the poverty level, to the production. So together with a circular economy, we also have to advocate for a just economy. And the two things go hand in hand, and it's something that we must push for and we must put very high, and it is very high on our agenda as the United Nations, of course, Development Program. I would probably stop here. I wouldn't like to do a lot of advertisement about what we do, what don't we do in terms of support. There is a beautiful stand outside that you can, of course, visit, but maybe the last concept, the last message, again, going back to circular economy and Agenda 2030, is the leave no one behind. The leave no one behind is, again, an extremely powerful message that must make us reflect. And again, it has a connection to what we're talking about, the zero waste. And I give you a practical example here in Turkey that we are very proud of. In the area of responding to the refugee crisis, of course, in the country, coming from Syria, the 3.6 million refugees, one of the big issues, and you're all aware of it, has been the pressure on municipality and municipal services in terms of responding to this. And the waste management has been and is amongst these an extremely important one for health reasons and for different reasons. And so an area of support that we believe in and we have been working on in this idea of leave no one behind is really how to see in this area what kind of circular economy / zero waste initiative we can take in order to fulfill this mandate. This is to say that in all areas that we all work, and this is definitely valid for us, we have to integrate this concept. And again, we go back to the idea of the integration of the Agenda 2030. Now, I will really leave it at that point because I know that time is short, but I'm happy to elaborate on some of these issues if asked to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tomasi. I mean, I think if I give you the floor for 1 hour, you can talk and you can give us really good examples what you have been doing here in Turkey for the refugees, especially. And we thank you very much for that one. And I know that, I mean, this issue, this Agenda 2030, the different issues there, they are supposed to be interfered, they are supposed to be I mean, there's linkages between these private sector partnerships, and also the leverage of the partnership is very important, and integration of these issues are important, and no one should be left behind. That's also important. This is also supposed to be done in the climate change issues, all the countries. And I always say that this since the establishment of the UN, this climate change and environmental issues, they are the one, all the countries, they have a consensus. That is very important. And because of that, because this is our common future, and I always say that the former generation and our current generation should apologize from the future generation, because we are the one who polluted, and our fathers and grandfathers, we are the one who polluted this world. And because of that, we want to see the full part of the glass, as you said. I mean, that is very important, and we always say that in Turkey there is no easy answer of a difficult question. So we have to work together with the cooperation and with all countries, and because we have only one earth, we have only one world, we have, as the Secretary General said for the climate change, we have no B plan or plan B. So we have one plan. We don't need to argue. We have to work together. So finally, actually, last but not the least, circular economy enables us to prolong the value of products, materials, and resources as long as we can, and to minimize the generation of the waste. So in this context, the zero waste approach become more and more popular in both developed and developing countries. So the OECD, since I think 1930s, the 1960s, after the Second World War. So yes, Mr. Koch, I will give you the floor. But when you have the members from developed countries and also from developing countries, as far as I know, so you may just the zero waste approach so you have the possibility to compare what's going on, and you can give good examples to your members. As in EPR report we said, they have a very good system. Every year they take 3 countries and make this performance report for the environment, and issue this one to show good example to all the countries in the world. So we were very happy to be exempt actually by OECD, and we are using that one. We sometimes use the good part, of course. I mean, we say the OECD already praised us, even our politicians, they are using that part. Of course, they also criticize many parts. So but politicians, they use the positive part, that is good. But to see how we are. So because of that, I want to ask Mr. Cox, how is the zero waste approach addressed in OECD countries, and what are the zero waste policy instruments used in OECD countries? So floor is yours, Mr. Cox.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much to the organisers for the invitation to be here. It's an absolute delight to be back in this beautiful city of Istanbul, even if it's a bit rainy today and I'm not sure I'm going to have the time to enjoy it, but it's always a pleasure to be here. You're quite right, the OECD is very active in the circular economy area. In fact, we're active in the whole environmental sphere. We've been around since 1961. The environment work's been going on since then. And we undertake a collection of best practices. We set standards for our member countries. We provide policy analysis and guidance. And we do these environmental performance reviews, like the one we did for Turkey earlier this year. It's like a report card. And we go through in detail of each OECD country's environmental performance against their own objectives, and say what you've been doing well and what you've been doing poorly. And in the area of waste, this was very interesting for Turkey. Turkey generates less municipal solid waste per person per year than the OECD average. Turkey collects at least as much of its municipal solid waste as the OECD countries. But 90% of the municipal solid waste is sent to landfills. There are no landfill taxes, and the existing waste fees are quite inadequate. And we've also seen in the report that the amount of hazardous waste being generated has increased quite alarmingly in the last decade. So against that background, and I take your point that the politicians praise the good bits and you're left to deal with the badder bits, but I think the zero waste strategy is a very important initiative and takes us certainly in the right direction. Importantly, if we embed that in a broader circular economy approach, which my colleagues here have been talking about. Now, the circular economy, it's not just one of those abstract ideas that has been kicking around academia for many years and has been picked up. It's actually something that not just governments have embraced, but businesses have embraced, because there are business opportunities here. Not only can it have environmental impact, new business models, when you think about the impacts of trends of digitalization, the growing urbanization, the shift towards decentralized regulations and so on, there are huge business opportunities out there. And in OECD countries, we are largely seeing the business sector out in front of regulators. They are leading the way. Policymakers are oftentimes scrambling to catch up. So what we focus on in the OECD is how we can get these two to be more in sync. How can we ensure that regulation and policy helps to drive change in the circular economy and in zero waste and does not hinder it? So what we're seeing in Turkey so far is a very good example of how to bring those together. The leadership at the very top, combined with a regulatory approach that is trying to drive this at the national, regional, and city level, and the business sector coming in and recognizing that there are opportunities there. Importantly, one of the things we emphasize is the multidisciplinary nature of this approach. Circular economy is not just about the economy. It's not just about the environment. It's about health. It's about people's livelihoods, about the cities we want to live in and we want to have our children live in. I've got a 12-year-old daughter. The city that she will be working and living in 2050 will be radically different to the city we have now, largely because of the policies that we're putting in place now. And I would emphasize now, the urgency of this is absolutely incredible. Materials Outlook last year that the global demand for materials will more than double by 2060 in the next 40 years. And if you think about the waste that will generate, that is in the absence of any policies to offset that. If you think about the waste that will generate, you think about the types of trends that are also going on around digitalization and urbanization. If we don't take action now, the cities of the future will not be inhabitable for our children and our grandchildren. So the urgency is absolutely important. I'd like to focus in on plastics if I could, because I think that's a really good set of examples. It's a really good prism through which to look at some of the things that we in the OECD countries are very much focused on in trying to drive the circular economy. And I'd like to focus on three things. The first one is prices work. Prices work. Markets work. They can be made to harness the energy and the innovation and the drive in areas like this. For example, you've introduced a plastics bag tax in Turkey. Early signs are that that's had an incredible impact in reducing plastic bag use. The same goes for many other OECD countries. And the key there is to make sure that the price reflects at least the willingness of people to pay. You can harness the behaviour change that is evident. You can harness the social movement and make money out of it for the government. In Ireland, for example, they started out with a plastic bag tax of 15 cents 15 euro cents. 3 years in, they discovered that people actually had built that into their expectations, and they raised the tax to 22 cents. Had a further impact on reduction in plastic bag use. So that kind of thing, I think, is really handy. Another example is landfill taxes. All those OECD countries that have higher landfill taxes have landfill rates of less than 1%. That is, the amount of municipal solid waste going to landfill is less than 1%. Compare that to 90% at the moment for Turkey. So these are countries that do have high landfill taxes. Belgium, Sweden, Switzerland, Finland, kind of the usual suspects in this space. They have to, of course, build this up over time, and you made the point in your opening remarks that this doesn't happen overnight. Some of these countries have been at this for 30 years or more. But you have to start somewhere. And that was one of the recommendations in the OECD review of Turkey. The second point I would make is that in relation to plastics, we need to strengthen the secondary recycling, the secondary plastics recycling markets. Governments can do a huge amount here. We are recommending that governments introduce a tax on virgin plastic. Why are we letting this unequal playing field between primary and secondary materials endure? We should be taxing the bads. Virgin plastics has a negative externality that we should be taxing. Now, it's not a surprise for an economist to be saying this, but it's not just us, it's many other proponents as well. We can strengthen demand, and governments have at their disposal levers here. Public procurement, recycled content standards. These are things that state-owned enterprises, that your regulations of government, these are levers that governments have at their disposal right now. And we're seeing in a number of OECD countries that green public procurement is driving innovation, driving new business models, and greening their operations as a result. The example you had of your new building is fantastic. It's that kind of leadership that can help drive innovation. And consumer education and awareness, of course. I mean, I'm sporting around, I don't know if you can see that, I've got this bit of man jewelry here. It's a bracelet made out of 1 pound of recycled plastic from the beach of Bali that is marketed by a group called 4Ocean. I got one for all my family for Christmas last year. They were thrilled, surprisingly thrilled. But it's this kind of consumer education and awareness that can really help to drive change. The third thing I would say is that circular economy is not just about the end point. It's not just about the use, it's about the design. A lot of the uncircularity is built in at the design stage. So eco-design, the sustainable design of plastics is key. We might want to recycle 100% of the plastics. The fact is that we cannot. The polymers in many plastics are hazardous, they're toxic. If you try and combine them with other plastics, you get reduced performance in the plastics, in the secondary plastics. So we need to take a truly circular approach and look at not just the end point or the use, but the design of plastics to build in recyclability from the very beginning. So governments have a lot to do there, particularly of things like aligning regulations between the chemicals legislation that you have and the waste management legislation. We had a global forum on sustainable plastic design in Denmark last year, where we brought together, for the first time it seemed, the chemical industry with the waste industry, and the waste regulators with the chemicals regulators. The first time these people got in the room, started to talk to each other. There's a lot that can be done there, and it has to be done because without that design feature built in, recycling built into the design, we're not going to get there. I'll leave it there, but it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about the zero waste strategy throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kok. Well, we, I think, run out of time, and this is Friday here in Turkey, and Friday in the world, we have a Friday pray, so many people will want to go there. So, thank you very much for all the valuable contributions to this meeting. And one thing I would like to, before stopping here, before just finishing, before the election, as you already mentioned, we priced the single-use plastics before the local elections, and many politicians in Turkey from the governing party, and even they just went to they come to us, just postpone this one after the election. You know what Her Excellency First Lady said to us? We cannot cheat our people. That was very valuable, because just after the election, if you put these taxes to the single waste plastics, we cheat the people who are going to vote. So they have to know this is good for them. Because of that, we are doing. And when we see the numbers, still we have been criticized on this issue, but the numbers have not changed. So the determination is very important issue, and of course the leadership is very important. And we know that there will be more, as you already clearly mentioned, the business opportunities and new business models will be coming. So thank you very much to all of you, our friends and colleagues, for your valuable participation. I wish that this summit will be fruitful to make great contribution to the field of waste management. Thank you very much.